Montana Territory, 1879. The first time Patrick Fielding laid eyes on the woman was just after sunrise, when the frost still clung to the tall grass, and the sky broke open in a wash of gold over the Bitterroot Range. She stepped out of the timberline like a ghost mud on her hem, a rifle slung over her back and 2 children tucked close at her sides. Patrick was on horseback, headed east with a wagon load of lumber when his gelding snorted and halted on the trail. What he saw made him blink. A woman, alone out here with 2 little ones, was not something you saw often. Not in this country. He dismounted slow, hands lifted. "You folks all right?" The woman's eyes narrowed, sharp as flint. She looked like she had not slept in days. Her voice was rough. "We do not need anything." The boy, maybe 10, clutched her skirt. The girl, younger, looked up at Patrick with wide, wary eyes. Patrick glanced at the sky, then back at them. "Look, I am not trying to bother you, but you are on the edge of the Flathead Woods and there is a storm coming in. You 3 will not last the night out here." The woman's jaw worked, her weight shifting like she was ready to bolt. But something in her, probably the way both kids were shivering despite the rising sun, made her hesitate. He spoke again, gentler this time. "Name's Patrick Fielding. Heading back to my homestead in the valley. Cabin is solid, fire's going, you are welcome to ride along." The boy looked up at her. "Mama, please," she finally nodded once. "Just for today." They climbed up into the wagon. The boy's name was Liam. The little girl was Lucy. The woman said her name was Daisy. She kept her voice low, and when Patrick glanced her way, she never quite met his eyes. He did not press. By the time they reached his cabin, nestled between pine and rock, with a split-rail fence and a corral out back, Lucy was asleep against her mother's shoulder. Liam helped gather kindling while Patrick lifted the girl down, careful not to wake her. Daisy stood on the porch, arms crossed tight. She looked at the land like it might vanish if she blinked. "You can stay in the loft," Patrick said. "It is warm, safe. No one comes out here but me." She nodded. "Thank you." They stayed the night, then another, and another after that. Patrick barely heard a word out of Daisy the first week, but the children talked. Lucy told him about a spotted calf she had seen once. Liam asked about the rifle hanging over his hearth. Then one night, after the kids had gone to bed, Daisy stayed behind at the table. She stared into her cup. Patrick waited. Finally, she whispered, "I am not who you think." He looked at her, quiet. The fire threw soft light across her face. She looked tired but strong. "Then tell me who you want to be," he said. She looked up, startled by the gentleness in his voice. Something behind her eyes cracked just a little. "My name is not Daisy," she said. "It is Delilah Lowell." Her hands trembled. "My husband, he was not kind. We ran. I thought we could disappear before he came back from Fort Benton, but he found us, took everything, burned the barn. Left us out there to starve." Patrick's jaw clenched. He breathed slow through his nose. "Did he follow you?" She shook her head. "Not yet, but he will." Patrick stood, walked over to the fire, then turned back to her. "He comes here, he will regret it." Delilah blinked fast but said nothing. Liam's voice came from the loft. "Mama," she stood quickly. "Coming." Patrick watched her climb the ladder. He did not sleep much that night. 2 days later, Liam helped Patrick muck out the stall. He asked questions about horses, about the land, about how long it took to build the cabin. "Did you build it alone?" Liam asked. Patrick nodded. "Every log." The boy grinned. "I want to build something one day." "You will." That night after supper, Delilah lingered again. She looked less guarded now. Her hair pulled back neat, sleeves rolled. "You built all this by yourself?" she asked. Patrick nodded. "Had to. After my older brother died, it was just me." She studied him. "You do not talk much about yourself," he shrugged. "Not much to say." Delilah looked down at her hands. I used to be a teacher. Before I married, I had plans. Then everything changed. Maybe it is time to make new ones." She looked up at him, something soft in her eyes. "You think that is possible?" "I do." The next morning, Patrick came in from the barn to find Lucy sitting at the table, drawing with a bit of charcoal on scrap wood. Delilah was cooking, the smell of cornbread thick in the air. When she met his eyes, she did not look away this time. He stepped closer. "You are doing all right," she nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." He touched her hand, just a brush. Her breath caught, but she did not pull away. Later, out by the fence, he found her staring out over the valley. "I do not know what this is," she said, "but it feels like peace." Patrick looked out with her. "You can stay as long as you want," she turned to him, eyes full. "And if I want to stay forever," he smiled, slow and honest, "then I will start clearing more land." Delilah laughed. The sound cracking opened something inside him. For the first time in years, he felt like the world might just be all right again. And when the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long, she stood beside him, not as a guest or a stranger, but something more, something real. The first snow came early that year, a soft hush over the valley that turned the pine tops white and made the earth brittle underfoot. Patrick laid fresh straw in the stall and chopped wood until his shoulders ached, the kind of ache that settled deep and kept his mind quiet. When he returned to the cabin, Delilah was at the hearth, a shawl around her shoulders, humming something low and unfamiliar. Lucy sat on the floor, threading dried berries onto a string. Liam carved at a block of pine with his pocket knife, tongue caught between his teeth. The room felt lived in now. Boots beside the door, steam on the windows, the faint scent of sage where Delilah had hung bundles to dry. Patrick hung his coat and stepped inside, brushing snow from his sleeves. Delilah turned. "I hope you don't mind. I found a sack of sweet corn near the shelves. Thought I'd try something." "I don't mind," he said. "It smells good." She offered a small nod, then glanced toward the children. "I was thinking," she said softly, "about the schoolhouse in the basin near the fork. The one with the roof caved in." "I know it," Patrick said. "It's been empty a while." "I could fix it," she said. "If the boards hold, teach again, not just my own, but any others nearby." She looked up. "Your neighbors, do they have children? 2 families, west and north, McClellans and the Judds." "They've got 5 between them if they've made it through the fall." Delilah's eyes lit with purpose, quiet but sure. "If I cleared out the rot, patched the walls, I could write lessons again. It wouldn't be much, but it'd be something." Patrick leaned against the doorframe. "You'd be good at it." She gave a small, uncertain smile. "I was. Once." Later, after the children had gone to bed, she stayed by the hearth while Patrick set another log to the fire. The wind whistled low through the chinks in the wall, and the warmth between them held steady. "I don't know what kind of man you think I was married to," she said, voice low, "but he never let me speak more than a few words at a time. Said too many ideas made a woman's hands idle." Patrick sat across from her. "You don't need to tell me more than you want to." "I want to tell it," she said. "Not for him, for me." He waited. "I was 18 when I married him. Thought I was in love, thought I'd found a good life. But he didn't want a partner, just someone to keep quiet and stay put. After Liam was born, things got worse. Lucy came 2 winters later. I stayed longer than I should have." She rubbed her thumb along the edge of her skirt. "I wasn't brave until I had to be." Patrick didn't offer pity, just listened. When she finished, she looked up, eyes glassy but dry. "You're not the same woman who ran from that," he said. "I don't know who I am yet," she whispered. "Then tell me who you want to be." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached for his hand. Her fingers were calloused at the tips, but warm. "I want to be someone who builds something worth keeping." Outside, the snow thickened. Patrick didn't let go of her hand. The next morning he hitched the wagon and loaded it with spare timber, rusted tools, and a coil of rope. Delilah stood beside him in a wool coat too long in the sleeves. She tied her hair back and climbed up beside him. They left Liam watching Lucy, who had taken to sorting buttons left in a tin by the hearth. Patrick had shown Liam how to load the rifle and set it by the door. The schoolhouse sat where the trees opened wide, half swallowed by wild grass and shadow. The roof sagged, and the door hung from one hinge. Delilah stepped down and ran her hand along the frame. "I taught my first class in a room half this size," she said. "Used to write lessons by lamplight." Patrick passed her a crowbar. "Then let's see what the bones look like." They worked until their hands were raw, prying planks loose, sweeping dirt from the cornerstones. Delilah climbed the low ladder into the rafters and pointed out beams that could be salvaged. By dusk, their boots were thick with mud, and her cheeks were ruddy with cold. She laughed once, high and sudden, when a squirrel dropped a pinecone square on Patrick's shoulder. He looked up, surprised, and she leaned against the doorway, her eyes bright. "You look better with sawdust in your hair," she said. "Then I'll keep working," he answered. When they returned, Lucy was asleep, curled beneath the quilt. Liam met them at the door, proud to report that no one had come near. "I think he likes the responsibility," Delilah said later, once the cabin had gone quiet. "He's steady," Patrick said. "Takes after someone." She looked at him then, not like a woman hiding or waiting, but like someone beginning to choose. "You've given us more than you know," she said. "You gave yourself the chance. I just offered the road." Delilah stepped closer. "And if I keep walking it," Patrick met her eyes, "then I'll walk beside you." She touched his face, tentative but sure, and he leaned into her palm. No kiss passed between them, not yet, but something settled between them, final and certain. A warmth that went beyond the firelight. Later, when Delilah climbed the ladder to the loft, she paused halfway, looking down at him. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'll bring my chalk slate. If we clean the windows, that old room might see its first lesson by week's end." Patrick watched her disappear into the shadows above. He did not sleep for a long while, but not from worry. He lay awake listening to the wind outside, and the faint sound of Lucy breathing, and the creak of the floor above as Delilah settled into the place that was, slowly, becoming her own. The third week turned the valley white. Snow deepened around the cabin, drifting high against the north wall, and the creek behind the barn froze in a quiet ribbon of ice. Patrick shoveled a path each morning, boots crunching under the weight. Every swing of the axe echoed sharp through the stillness. Delilah had begun rising before dawn. She moved through the mornings with purpose, hair braided down her back, hands already red from cold water drawn from the well. She hung wet linens by the stove to dry, then sat beside Lucy while she practiced her letters on a scrap of paper Patrick had dug from an old ledger. Liam helped where he could, never asking to be excused, his shoulders carrying more than his age should have demanded. One afternoon, Delilah stood beside Patrick as he hammered a brace into the wagon tongue. Her cheeks were wind-chapped, and a needle and thread hung from the pocket of her apron. "Your neighbor McClellan," she said, brushing a curl behind her ear. "I saw smoke from the south ridge. I was thinking once the road clears I could ride out, ask if they'd send their children to the schoolhouse." "They might," Patrick said, "but they'll want to know who's teaching. That's a cautious family." She nodded slowly. "I want to tell the truth about who I was, about what I left behind. But I don't know if that's wise." "They'll judge you either way," he said. "Better they do it with the truth than a lie." Delilah glanced at him. "And you judged me." "I listened," Patrick said. "That's different." That evening the wind dropped. Inside, Delilah unfolded a worn cloth bundle and laid out 3 books, faded, frayed at the corners but intact. Patrick watched from the hearth, where he whittled a new yoke pin for the sled. "These were my father's," she said. "He taught me to read from the Psalms and then from these. I took them when I left. I didn't mean to. I was just grabbing what I could." Patrick set down his knife. "You ever think about going back?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "There's nothing left to go back to. My mother passed when I was 16. My father was gone before Lucy was born. I imagine the house is boarded, if not taken over by vines by now." She opened one of the books, fingers resting lightly on the page. "I used to think I'd grow old in that house. Thought I'd teach in the same room until the walls gave out. Funny how sure we are of things before we have a reason not to be." Patrick leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I used to think I'd marry a girl from town, someone who grew up here, someone who knew how to bake without burning the bread." Delilah smiled faintly. "You thinking of anyone in particular?" "No," he said. "That was before I knew what I needed." She met his eyes, then looked back down at the page. "And what do you need now?" He didn't answer right away, just watched the firelight move across her skin. "Something honest," he said finally. "Something that doesn't pretend to be perfect." Delilah closed the book and sat back. "That's not a small thing to ask." "I don't need small things." Snow fell again that night, light but steady. When Delilah rose the next morning, Patrick had already saddled the mare. He handed her a wrapped bundle and pointed toward the ridge. "If you're set on seeing McClellan, you'll get there before midday. Stay off the western bank, the snow drifts deep there." Liam stood by the porch, Lucy beside him in her wool cap, watching their mother mount the horse. Delilah looked down at them, then back at Patrick. "You'll wait for me?" she asked, voice low. "We'll be here," he said. She nodded once, then nudged the horse forward. She returned before dusk, cheeks flushed from wind and nerves. Patrick met her at the barn while she unsaddled the mare. "They said yes," she said. "3 children, ages 7 through 11. They want to start after the thaw, said they'd bring their own slate and chalk." Patrick lifted the saddle from the mare's back. "That's a good start." "They asked questions," she said, "about where I came from, why I'm here. And I told them the truth, not all of it, but enough. They didn't turn me away." She looked up at him with something close to wonder. "I've never told anyone outside of you." Patrick didn't reach for her, but he took a step closer. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." The silence between them felt warm, not empty. Patrick reached past her to hang the bridle, and when his hand brushed hers, she didn't pull back. "You want to stay in the loft forever?" he asked. She blinked, caught off guard. "You asking me to move downstairs?" "I'm asking if you want to make this yours, all of it. Not just shelter, not just a place to hide." Delilah looked toward the cabin, where smoke curled from the chimney, and the sound of Lucy's laughter drifted faint through the air. "I'm not hiding anymore." "Then stay," he said. "Not out of need, but because you want to." She reached up and touched his coat near the collar, fingers lingering. "I want to." Later that night, she placed her books on the shelf beside Patrick's, folded the quilt from the loft onto the foot of the downstairs bed, and sat beside him by the fire. Neither spoke of what it meant. They didn't have to. Outside, the snow quieted. Inside, a new season was beginning. And Delilah Lowell, for the first time in her life, wasn't running. By mid-December, the schoolhouse walls stood straight again, patched with cut pine and nails Patrick had scavenged from an old shed that once belonged to his brother. Delilah had sewn curtains from rough muslin, and the Judd children's father brought a bucket of lime to white the inside walls. The children arrived 3 days a week, their boots caked in snow, their faces flushed with cold and curiosity. Liam sat in the front row, back straight, answering questions only when called on. Lucy stayed at home, still too small for lessons, and too fond of curling against the hearth with a doll Delilah had stitched from cloth scraps. One evening, after the children had gone and the cabin was quiet, Delilah sat at the rough kitchen table with a scrap of paper and a stub of pencil. She didn't look up when Patrick stepped in from the cold, brushing snow from his shoulders. "You're late," she said. "I thought you might have run off with the Judd's mule." Patrick dropped his gloves beside the stove. "Tempting, but he bites." She glanced at him. "You're bleeding." He touched his wrist where the skin had split. Fence post slipped. Delilah stood, crossed the room, and took his arm. "Sit," she said, "and stop pretending it doesn't sting." He obeyed, watching her fetch a bowl of water and a length of clean cloth. She worked quietly, brow furrowed. "You stitched these curtains by hand," he said, nodding toward the window. "And you never once stuck yourself." "I did," she said. "Just didn't bleed all over the floor about it." Patrick chuckled low in his throat. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if you'd stayed, if none of this had happened?" She didn't answer right away. She wrapped the cloth firm but gentle around his wrist, then sat across from him again. "I think I'd still be small," she said finally. "Not in size, but in spirit, like I'd folded myself up to fit someone else's pocket." Patrick didn't move. "And now," Delilah met his eyes, "now I feel unfolded." Outside, the wind rattled the shutter loose. Patrick rose, secured it with a nail, and returned to the table. "You've changed things here," he said. "Not just for the children, for me." "I haven't tried to," she said. "You didn't have to." The next morning brought a letter, delivered by a passing trapper who stopped for coffee and thawed his boots by the fire. The letter was short, written in a hurried hand on creased paper. It was from the McClellans' word of a fever sweeping through a settlement to the south. 2 families had taken shelter nearby. The McClellans asked if Delilah might come help with care, as they'd heard she had a steady hand and a calm way with children. Delilah read the letter twice, then folded it, eyes distant. "You'll go," Patrick said. She looked at him, surprised. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She nodded slowly. "They'll need help with feeding the little ones, and someone to make broth if the mothers are too weak." Patrick crossed the room and opened the chest by the hearth. He pulled out 2 jars of preserved carrots, a sack of flour, and a bundle of dried mint leaves. "You'll take these." Delilah's hands trembled slightly as she packed them into a cloth bag. "I'll be gone 2 nights, maybe 3. "I'll keep the fire going," Patrick said. "And the children fed." She looked at him, eyes steady. "I don't want you to think I'm leaving." "I don't." That night, after Lucy had gone to sleep and Liam was reading by lantern light, Delilah sat beside Patrick on the bench by the window. The moon spilled silver across the floorboards. "I used to think I'd never have a place again," she said. "Never have a man look at me and see someone worth leaning on." Patrick didn't speak. He reached over and took her hand. Delilah leaned her head to his shoulder. "I want to build something here, not just the school. A life. With you." Patrick turned his face toward her hair, breathed in the faint scent of wood smoke and lavender. "Then let's build it." They didn't kiss, not yet, but there was no need. Some things weren't hurried. By morning she was gone with the mule and the food packed tight. Liam helped Patrick fetch water, and Lucy sat on the porch steps with a blanket around her shoulders, watching the road where her mother had disappeared into the trees. "She'll be back," Patrick said. Lucy nodded. "Mama always comes back." And when Delilah did return, 3 days later, cheeks hollowed from worry but eyes alight, she stepped from the saddle and into Patrick's arms without hesitation. He didn't ask what she'd seen. He didn't need to. She held him for a long time, and Liam and Lucy wrapped around her waist, and the wind moved gently through the pine. That night, she laid her head on the pillow beside his, and when dawn came, she didn't rise alone. By early March, the valley softened beneath the thaw. Ice pulled back from the creek's edge, and the first green tips of grass pushed through the snow-packed soil near the barn. The air still held a bite in the morning, but come afternoon, the sun stretched long and warm across the mountainside. Patrick repaired the last of the fencing near the west slope, the ground finally soft enough to dig deep and set the posts straight. Delilah stood nearby with a ledger in her hand, counting supplies and scratching notes with a stub of pencil. Her hair was pinned back with a length of twine, and her sleeves were rolled past the elbow. "You've got less than a week's worth of oats left," she said, shading her eyes. "Enough flour for maybe 4 loaves if you stretch it." "I'll head to the basin on Saturday," Patrick said. "If the pass holds, I'll be back by nightfall. You sure you don't want to come?" Delilah glanced toward the ridge. "I'd rather stay. Mrs. Judd's youngest is behind on his letters. I promised I'd meet him at the schoolhouse." Patrick leaned on the post. "It sounds like you're settling into permanence." "I suppose I am." She turned toward him, her voice softer. "Is that what this is? A life we're building?" He met her eyes. "Feels like it." Delilah stepped closer, the ledger still in her hand. "Then I think we ought to make it official." Patrick straightened. "You mean?" "I mean I'd like to marry you," she said without hesitation. "Not out of need, not because I owe you safety or kindness, but because I've grown to love the way you wake before dawn and never complain. The way you never ask for more than a person's willing to give. And because I want to plant things beside you and grow old watching them come up." Patrick didn't answer right away. He reached for her hand, calloused and familiar, and held it tight in his. "I'd marry you this minute if I thought the preacher could ride this far before dusk." She smiled. "He'll come, if we ask." They set the date for the first Sunday after the pass cleared. Mrs. McClellan offered her parlor for the vows, and her eldest daughter lent Delilah a pale muslin dress that had been sewn the year before for her own wedding. It hung a bit long at the hem, but Delilah hemmed it twice before the fire and wore it like it had been made for her all along. They rode to the McClellans at dawn with Liam and Lucy bundled between them on the wagon seat. Lucy clutched a crown of dried flowers Delilah had woven just the evening before. The girl had insisted on placing it on her mother's head herself. The preacher from the basin held the ceremony beneath the cottonwoods behind the house, the ground still damp from snowmelt but clean underfoot. Patrick wore his brother's coat and a shirt Delilah had mended with her own hands. When the words were said and the rings exchanged carved from iron and polished smooth, Delilah turned to face the small gathering and raised Lucy's hand in hers. "We're not just a pair of names joined today," she said. "We're a family. And I want everyone here to know that." Patrick bent slightly to take Liam's hand as well, his voice steady. "From this day on, we belong to each other, all of us." They shared their first kiss under the bare-limbed branches, the sun warming their backs and the wind quiet for once. Delilah's hands found Patrick's face, and he held her like something he'd spent his whole life reaching for. They returned to the cabin that evening, the wagon rattling gently along the trail. Liam rode in front, holding the reins with quiet pride, and Lucy leaned against Delilah's shoulder, the crown still perched crooked in her curls. Inside the cabin, the fire was already catching. Patrick carried Delilah over the threshold, not because it was tradition, but because he wanted to. She laughed, breathless and surprised, and kissed his cheek before he set her down. That night, after the children had gone to sleep in the loft, Patrick and Delilah sat together on the edge of the bed, sharing a plate of cornbread and dried apples. Her bare feet brushed his under the quilt. Outside, the stars wheeled wide and bright over the valley. "I want to plant sweet peas along the fence this spring," she said, head resting against his shoulder, "and maybe sunflowers along the southern wall." Patrick traced his thumb along her knuckles. "Then we will," She looked up at him. "Do you believe we've earned this?" He kissed her temple, his voice low. "No one handed it to us. We built it." Spring came in full 2 weeks later. The schoolhouse filled with the scent of chalk and pine resin, and the children arrived more often now, their boots muddy and their mouths full of questions. Delilah taught them with a quiet authority, her voice steady, her words clear. Liam helped her carry water, and Lucy sat near the hearth with a doll in her lap, humming softly while the others recited their sums. Patrick cleared new land beyond the rise for planting. He dug rows straight and deep, and when Delilah came to him with a satchel of seeds, he took her hand and pressed it into the soil beside his own. They planted together in silence, the wind mild and the earth ready. By summer, the sweet peas bloomed along the fence, and the cabin stood shaded by sunflowers that reached above the porch rail. The children ran barefoot through the grass, and laughter came easy now. One warm evening in July, Patrick sat on the porch with Delilah curled beside him, her head tucked beneath his chin. Liam and Lucy chased fireflies across the yard. Delilah's voice was soft as the dusk. "You make me feel like the world isn't something I have to brace against." Patrick kissed her brow. "You make me feel like I've finally come home." They sat like that until the stars came out and the children fell asleep on the porch steps, and then, together, they carried them inside. Their love, hard-earned and honest, never asked to be perfect. It only asked to be chosen, and they chose each other every morning, every quiet night, for all the years that followed.